Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. You know, the choice facing the president is, does he let Obamacare blow apart of its own, or does he step in and somehow to save it and join with the Democrats? I think that's the question facing him. And does he move on to something else, or does he bring recriminations against the Freedom Caucus? Well, we're going to talk to Steve Moore about that later on. Terry.
Well, tax cuts are the big thing this morning, aren't they? And
well, we'll see. All right.
I think Americans are waiting to find out where this goes. The president and Congress are going to have to agree on how much they're planning to cut taxes. The White House may even reach across the aisle to some Democrats as well. Gary Lane has the story.
With the health care defeat, President Trump learned that building consensus even within his own party can be extremely difficult. Convincing Congress to pass meaningful tax reform may be just as hard. And after the health care loss, the White House may look across the aisle for some votes.
I think it's time for our folks to come together. And I also think it's time to potentially get a few moderate Democrats on board as well.
But Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer suggests the president may need to become more like a Democrat.
He moved so far the hard right that it's virtually impossible for us to work with him. If he changes, he could have a different presidency.
But Trump is unlikely to change his conservative tendencies, at least when it comes to cutting taxes and moving the economy forward. The U.S. corporate tax rate is among the very highest in the world. The president says if the United States is to attract businesses from overseas, it must drop the rate down from 35% to 15%. America would become a country with one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the world. Trump says he also wants to lower the tax burden on American families. However, the exact rate may be up for negotiation.
I think that moving forward, the president's vision on lowering taxes for every American is what's going to unite not just the Republican Party, but I think some of those Democrats are going to come on board as well. If we can provide one of the biggest middle-class tax cuts in the history of this country, I think that's important.
Also part of the president's plan, a border tax on imports. He says that will even the playing field with other countries who haven't played fair on trade. It's designed to bring in more money to offset the loss of revenues to Washington from the tax cuts. But Congressman Mark Meadows, chairman of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, predicts real tax reform with lower rates will generate more income and greater economic growth, which would help both businesses and consumers.
When we start to grow the economy at 4.1%, it actually not only increases wages, but it puts more money in Americans' pockets each and every day.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Well, with us now is our friend Steve Moore, an economic advisor to the Trump campaign. And Steve, let me ask you this question. I started the program. I know there's such recrimination, and there must be some real bile in people's craws. But would you let Obamacare just fall of its own weight till next fall and then try to rescue it, or would you reach in now and try to save it?
Hi, Pat. Good morning. And yeah, I would say this, that I think that we have to entirely repeal Obamacare. There's nothing salvageable about that law. And, you know, the problem, I think Trump summarized the problem very well last week when he said, if we stay on the current course with Obamacare, the entire health insurance market is going to be destroyed, and nobody's going to have health insurance. So not only are, you know, the liberals say, oh, you know, 10, 15 million people are going to lose their health insurance under the Republican plan. Everybody's going to lose their health insurance if we stay on the current course that we're on, because it is like the Titanic, and there's no way to save it. So, and by the way, Pat, I'm going to say this. I'm going to make a prediction on your show. I believe within the next 3 to 6 months, we are going to revisit this issue, and maybe even sooner than that, and we are going to get this thing passed, and it's going to be, if not entire repeal of almost all of Obamacare. And by the way, why don't we try to use the free market system, the free enterprise system, to lower health care costs through competition and choices for consumers, let people buy insurance across state lines. If you do all of those things, you really fix the health care system, make it affordable to people. That's the big irony, by the way, of Obamacare, Pat. What is the title of that law, the Affordable Care Act? It actually should be called the Unaffordable Care Act.
Well, what about taxes? You know, it used to be you could count on a Republican majority passing legislation. Can you count on the Freedom Caucus to come in now for meaningful tax reform?
We got to get this done. You know, I've said since the start of the year, I've said it a couple times on your show, there's two must-do items on the to-do list of Republicans this year. We got to get rid of Obamacare, and we have to provide a tax cut for families and businesses. By the way, just one slight correction on your previous report on the corporate tax. Your reporter said we have among the highest. We're not among the highest corporate tax. We have the very highest of all the countries in the world. We're at 40%. The rest of the world, most of the countries we compete with, Germany and Japan and Australia and Ireland, Canada, Mexico, they're closer to 20%. It's like a Head Start program the United States is giving to every country that we compete with. And by the way, I believe with what Congressman Meadows just said is very true, that if you bring that corporate tax rate down to, say, 15 or 20%, as Donald Trump and Paul Ryan want to do, I believe that that will actually raise revenue for the government. And you know why, Pat? Because all those businesses that have been leaving the United States, all of a sudden it's going to be like a magnet. They're coming right back.
Well, the Democrats have this knee-jerk reaction to anything Trump proposes, and anything that looks like they put a few dollars in the pocket of successful people is anathema to them. Do we just run over the Democrats, or do you think you'll get some on board to help?
I'd like to see, look, I would love to see a bipartisan victory. Why not have a big tax cut for middle-class families, lower the tax rates for not just our corporations, by the way, Pat, but for our 28 million small businesses out there. I mean, when you started your business, it started as a small business and grew into a big business, and that's the American dream, right? Is to build your business, and then why not add some infrastructure spending, which is what the unions want? Call it a jobs program, and try to get 65 or 70 Democrats I mean 65, 70 senators with a number of Democrats on board. I'd love to see that. But I don't know yet, Pat. I don't know whether the Democrats are willing to be cooperative. So far, they've said no to everything Donald Trump wants to do.
Well, now, the House Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady has got a tremendous tax plan. Will that be the framework, you think, for the bill coming out?
Well, there's going to be work done. You know, this is a sausage-making factory here in Washington. It's never too pretty to watch. But I think we're going to come out with a great tax bill. I think it's going to lower business taxes, provide relief for middle-class families. Another feature of this, Pat, I really like, because, as you know, I work with Donald Trump on this tax plan. We want to provide for those companies like General Electric and Boeing and Apple that have literally hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars overseas. Why not just tax them at 10%, bring that money back to the United States to create jobs, to build factories, to pay workers more money in their salaries. And then not only do you have a stimulus to the economy, but, Pat, then you get, if my math is right, 10% of $1 trillion, $100 billion of revenue for the government. So as I see it, that's a win-win for everybody.
Well, this deal, are they going to just fix the rates or actually go into the tax code? They can't reform the total. That monstrosity is too much for one time. They're just going to try to cut the rates. Is that the deal, first off?
Well, I've devoted 30 years of my life, Pat, to tax reform, and I'm an old Steve Forbes, Jack Kemp flat tax guy. I'd love to get rid of all the deductions and loopholes and carve-outs and special interest provisions and get the rate down to 17% or so. Why not have a postcard return, Pat? Why not make it really easy for people in 15 minutes to fill out their tax form? As you know, we're now in tax season. You know, I've been staying up late at night trying to figure out how much I owe night after night after night. And that, you know, why does it have to be so complicated, Pat? The only people who benefit from that are tax lawyers, accountants, and politicians.
Well, they're the lobby that would stay in for the current bill. You're exactly right. Well, Steve, I hope you're right.
I'll tell you this, Pat.
Yeah.
Everybody in this town of Washington that I'm sitting in, the swamp, they don't want to reform the tax system because that's how Washington derives its power. But I tell you, you get out of Washington, D.C., across the country, and people want a simplified tax system, and they want to pay less taxes.
Well, Steve, I hope you're right, and I hope the American people will get behind you and Brady and others who are so sensible in this whole matter and listen and shut up the yapping on the left that says, oh, it's this tax cut for the rich. They want to, put money in the pockets of the rich and on the backs of the poor and all that stuff. Steve, God bless you. Let's hope you're right. We're with you.
Thanks, Pat. We're going to win. We're going to win on both of these things, I promise you.